Now this brings us from an area of what was considered regulation to deregulation. Now, what am I talking about? Well, if I'm going to start talking about that, we kind of got to get a little bit of the historical aspects of what media is, what it was, and also the how the country, from a corporate standpoint, has transitioned from where we were to where we are now. Now, 19th century, 20th century, you were in the industrial age. All right, it was about production, real products being produced. That was the most important thing, or sort of could be natural energy, energy sources. It was always something that you were producing. Now we have gone from the industrial age to the information age, and that started right around the 1950s up until what is today. Knowledge is power, information is everything. This is what all these things that we're doing. It's lots of things that we don't even really can put in our hand. Heck, money you don't even have to put in your hand. It could be just a number in an account somewhere, and it's not really physical. You can make it physical if you want, and you can buy physical things with it, but it's become all about information and information being one of the most powerful things, and that's what the age we're in now, the information age, and you're smack right in it. You know nothing other than the information age. It's what your life has been completely about. So we've gone to information-based economy. This is where movies and TV and radio and the web and computer software is just being sold at a way that has never been seen before. We now have our international conglomerates where you can sell anything from anywhere and make money. Because before that, before all this technology, you had a limited base. You had a limited customer base. So it made it even harder. But now it's become easier with the technologies we have today and how we sell things. Now, what were we talking from regulation to deregulation? Okay, it's regulation to deregulation of not of from a corporate standpoint, and then we're also going to get into the deregulation of how media works, of how that industry works, and who can own what, and what company, how many can own so much of some said type of media. This is what this is going to be about, and how it's evolved over the years. Okay, so we talked about going from the industrial to the information age. Now, historically, especially in the late 19th century, you had the Industrial Revolution and things such as the railroads and steel and oil. These were all major companies. They still are major companies, but even more so back in the late 19th century into the early 20th century. You're talking about Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, Carnegie. They all had monopolies, either in oil or steel or shipping and the railroads. And things weren't working as well. They were corrupt. They were corrupt with labor practices, including child labor. There was also complete manipulation of the market, and they would crush smaller competitors. And this was a very different time. There weren't many rules for that. It's a free market economy, but it was a little too free at some points. So there were no rules. So it was not giving everybody that chance to be able to come up and have a new product or be bought out, and they get the money anyway. So the whole point was to have other people get a chance to make their own way, like these companies did. Now, one of the things that the monopolies were called, they were organized into trusts. So that's where when you hear about monopolies and antitrust legislation, that's what they're talking about, because these were trusts. Their official name, legal name. When they created these companies, they were called trusts. So that's where antitrust laws come from, that terminology. So in the early 1890, you had the Sherman Antitrust Act. This is where you first see the U.S. government and their first precedent of breaking up monopolies and trusts. And what they would do is, one of the strategies they would do is that they would the monopoly would fix prices. So they knew that any competition that wanted to come in couldn't, because they couldn't possibly charge that little and be able to even hope to compete and hope to have a successful business. So that was one of the first acts. This is lots of times. So you're seeing the beginning of monopolies being taken down in this country's history. 24 years later, the Clayton Antitrust Act. What people would do sometimes is manufacturers said, okay, are you sure you're only selling all our products in your stores? Because we're not going to sell to you if you start buying our competitors' things. So think about it this way. Let's just say Coca-Cola says to a store owner, yeah, we're not going to sell to you if you're also selling Pepsi products. We can't have that. Can you imagine that, going to just any general store or supermarket or convenience store or something like that, and them not having Coke and Pepsi there at that store? It's been commonplace, but it gives that shop owner the flexibility, because some people like Coke, some people like Pepsi. In this specific example, but yeah, they had to pass a law for that, because it was nothing wrong up to that point. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, we're not going to sell to you unless you make sure you don't buy our competitor. They couldn't do that. They realized this put a strain on lots of small businesses out there. They couldn't compete. Once again, they wanted to make sure they had the ability to have a prosperous business. So, and that could also deal with restaurants, if you think about that. It's evolved over the years. And then in 1950, they had another act. This was where it started limiting mergers, because certain companies would get together. Remember, it's 1950. It's just after the World War II, not too much longer after that. They saw some things popping up with certain companies that were getting a little too big, and that would have been basically a type of de facto monopoly. And they're saying, yeah, no, we can't have that. All right, and then there's things that are called joint ventures that they would do, where it wouldn't be exact ownership or a merger, but they would combine on certain business practices or business projects, or where this would then reduce competition for other companies. So it was basically kind of like a monopoly, even though both those companies were making money, but they were shutting out a whole lot of other people. So as time went by, things changed because people were trying new and interesting ways to get around the antitrust laws. And you'll find that with any law. People don't think about certain things. Oh, we need a law for that. Well, we didn't need a law. Maybe there was no technology for that certain law or that certain crime, and it pops up, or certain things happen, and then they have to come up with a law. That's something that's going to continue to be something from here on out, just in society in general, as we advance as a society. All right. So those are the main acts of dealing with antitrust legislation. So over the years, and now we're kind of getting into media deregulation. All right. So deregulation is the cutting back of laws, a more free market economy, a more free for in this case the media companies, the media industry. Jimmy Carter, late 1970s, 77 to 81, and the Reagan from 81 to 89. They both cut back some rules for media. If you remember, cable started to rise in the early 1980s, and this is where we see the rise of all those cable companies. And that was in part because of the deregulation, and with deregulation of cable companies in general, and cable networks, and distributors of cable. So that's where you saw some of the rise of this because of the deregulation. Now, some critics said, some people said, oh, this deregulation is going to have more competition, prices are going to go down. And others said, hey, they're going to get some really big companies out of this. There were still laws on the books that limited that, so it wasn't a big deal back then, but it was the precursor to all of that. It was the starting point to where we are now. Just understand with history and things how they progress. It takes a while for these things to happen, and it's one thing after another, after another, and after another. Very rarely is it we flip the switch and it's totally different. Lots of times it's things that happen over a long period of time that create a reality that you are born into, that you experience, and sometimes during that people forget the history. They don't know what things were like before then. And that's why it's important to know about these different things, and know about the history, and know about the precedents, and know what it was like before. Maybe it was worse, maybe it was better. But if you don't know, if people aren't showing you and sharing with you and telling you about that, that that hurts you because you're not able to fully understand what's going on. You just accept it. This is what it is. It's the way it's always been. So that's one of the arguments for knowing history, knowing where things come before. It is important because if you don't know, then you might not know what you're losing, or might not know the opportunities that you had at one time, but you don't know now. But you don't now because these things happened before. Can you make it right? Right? So that's the importance of this. This is more than just knowing the answers for a test. Get it in your mindset. Okay? That's why these things are important. You're going to be the future leaders of tomorrow. That's why these things are important. So many things are ignored because of that. Oh, it doesn't really matter. It does. That's why it matters. Because if you don't know, you don't know what you lost, and you don't know what's going to be lost for other future generations, possibly your future generations, your future children, your future grandchildren. That's why it's important.